Welcome to the Making Waves at Sea Level podcast with your host, Tom Singer. In each episode, we will explore the interesting stories of business executives, entrepreneurs, and industry leaders who are shaking things up and growing their companies. It is time to make some waves. Now here's your host, Tom Singer.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of Making Waves at Sea Level. Thank you so much for joining us on this show that was formerly called Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do. But all good things must go through changes. You can't be stagnant forever. And my own career has sort of morphed and changed a little bit. I'm now working in the executive search world, and I'm dealing with a lot of people who work in that C-level positions, a lot of companies who are trying to find strategic hires. So I thought I would make the pivot from the entrepreneurs to the leadership of companies, because I think that can help all of us, because we're going to talk about what do great leaders do? How do they make waves? And today I'm interviewing an old friend of mine. I don't know why I never had him on the show before, but Bill Leake is the CEO of Apogee Results. And they're a company, they've got somewhere around 22 employees right now, and they help companies get found online. Because let's face it, if people are searching for you and they're not finding you when they're searching, you're not going to have a shot at their business. So you've got to be able to be found, and that's what Bill's company does. So, hey, Bill Leake, welcome to Making Waves at Sea Level.
Thank you very much, Tom. It is a pleasure to be here with you, and excited about the new direction for the show.
Yeah, no, it's kind of fun. So tell everybody a little bit more about Apogee Results.
Okay. Well, we are a digital marketing consultancy. We live or die by the strength of our talent. So have a passion for the industry you're entering as well, because if people are in competitive spaces, a lot of times you're not going to win if you show up with the San Diego State football team of digital marketing. You might need to show up with the USC football team of digital marketing.
Wow, that's kind of a burn on my alma mater. Look at that.
I'm just, San Diego State is magnificent in many respects, but few alums really are expecting a national champion.
Really? Said from a guy who went to Yale.
We had national champions 100 years ago.
Well, I could make fun of the Ivy League all day long, but my daughter just got into Dartmouth, so I'm an Ivy League fan now.
Yeah, it's amazing how rapidly draining personal bank accounts of parents turn people into Ivy League fans. They're very good at doing that because they now want to include you in their alumni network, in a sense. Yeah,
I noticed that. My other daughter went to Carnegie Mellon, and they still send me like solicitations to, donate. And I'm like, wow, I kind of donated for 4 years.
Yeah. No, but you can keep giving. You can just keep giving.
That's what they keep saying. And I say, call my daughter. She's, let her and her fiance donate, not me. So keep going about your company. So you live and die by your people, and then let's talk about
live and die by the people. The war for talent is always a challenge because the A grade talent is thinner on the ground everywhere than one would like it to be, and thinner in Austin than Austin likes to admit.
Yeah, that is very true. So let's pivot the conversation to your clients. What type of clients do you work with, and what do you guys do?
We typically work with high growth and private equity backed firms. We do work with a lot of tech companies that have gotten a little bit past the startup phase. We help ensure that once they've figured out who their customers are, where are those customers currently living online? What are they doing? How do we get them? First, the messaging and positioning of our clients, and then how do we ultimately, at some point, ideally cycle them through our clients' websites and have them react positively enough so they either purchase something on a shopping cart or they get into our client CRM system, so our client can address them with a whole range of other techniques.
So, in the world of what you do, I know it's super competitive. What does your company do to, as we might say, make waves?
So several things. One we do speak at most of the major industry shows and events. That's something of a differentiator. At least in Texas, there aren't that many companies that have a national presence. We do a lot of volunteering and give back work for people who are probably not going to be positioned to be a client of ours, but we do want to leave the ecosystem better. And so we sponsor kind of free trainings and free events. We have our own team members sponsored to go attend conferences and shows. It's a little bit less of that in today's world because there aren't as many of them, but investing in the continuing education of our people is a key success factor for us. And one of the things is really just focusing relentlessly on attracting and retaining folks who enjoy the work, who realize that they get to go solve puzzles every day, and who are intellectually curious and like solving puzzles and like solving puzzles on behalf of clients.
So let's go backwards in your career. I mentioned that you went to Yale, and where did you go from there? What sort of led you into this leadership role of a company?
Well, after Yale, I worked at a consultancy that was the founding partner had been at Bain, and before that, he'd had a PhD in economics, and before that, he had a business back before it was all the rage. That was basically a fair trade kind of business where he had indigenous folks in Peru making crafty things and selling them in the 1980s to various folks before there was online commerce and that sort of thing. So he'd had an interesting set of experiences. He'd founded a Bain modeled consulting firm, but focused on VC and private equity backed companies, generally in the Boston tech scene, but ultimately moved his business out to Silicon Valley and did even better there. But I worked with him for a couple of years. It was my first 2 years out of Yale. Then went to work for a management consultancy called McKinsey. Did that for a couple of years. Then picked up an MBA, which was vastly more boring than my undergraduate, but a couple of useful skills there. And then kind of set out to say, well, what do I really want to do with my career? And it was kind of a hodgepodge. I spent some time with a software company, spent some time with inside of a venture capital firm. I spent some time building an Austin-based firm that at one point was the fastest growing company on earth and the first company to ever sell $1 million on the internet. And then I did a couple fully entrepreneurial things as president of a small software company that grew to become a mid-sized software company. And that was where that and the previous firm where we sold the first to get to $1 million of internet sales before eBay, before Amazon, before any of those guys. That was kind of where I first learned, the power of digital marketing. And that's sort of what led me into versions of my current career, which is realizing that when you show up with, the Alabama football team of digital marketing versus the Texas State football team of digital marketing, truly magical and transformative things can happen that can make almost all the difference between success and failure.
So I met you when you were leading one or the other of those Austin-based software companies that were doing the e-commerce stuff, and then you ventured out on your own. And so most of the time that I've known you, you've been working for yourself, and you've had a couple of iterations, like you said, of what you do. But what do you like about the leadership role? What do you like about being CEO?
What I really like is, from my perspective, the opportunity to engage really talented folks, give them some broad direction and some boundaries and guidelines, but for the most part, give them space and let them do their magic and watch them develop and try to help them in the developing. And for me, that's because I'm in a space that engages knowledge workers and high capacity knowledge workers. There are other businesses that I would not enjoy being in a C-level role in. For instance, if I were running call centers, that to me, operations is fiendishly important, but in the rank and file out there in the call centers, you're dealing. I don't want to be in a business where I'm having to measure how long someone's bathroom break was. I don't want to be in a business where I have to manage other people's adulting. So I've chosen one that a role that I can do a C-level, but I can do a C-level with the people that I might in another world be friends with them and just hang out with them, because these are intellectually curious people that have a client service ethos.
So I met you kind of out and about networking at different Austin types events. And I've noticed recently, even in the quarantine, you've been showing up at the Association for Corporate Growth, Austin's local online sort of educational and networking events. So I know that you think it's important to be active and involved. Why do you think, for like somebody who's an executive, sometimes people are like, oh, I don't network, I just hide. I have other people who do that. Why do you think it's important to be part of your community?
Several reasons. One is the opportunity to give back and mentor, and there are always people who helped us up the ladder to the clubhouse early in our careers, and I think there's a concomitant obligation to be out there and have some availability to help other people with that, and so being engaged in the community in that way is important. I do think that. It's also important that the people of C-level go find other ones. We can get so caught up in our own businesses that we don't find people that are also dealing with some of the same struggles, or in adjacent businesses, not necessarily competitive ones, and lean into them and lean into their experience base and share ours at a kind of a peer networking level. If I've made mistakes, and I've made plenty, and by sharing my experiences, I can help someone else make different mistakes, that's a great thing, and vice versa. And I do think that humans tend to become who they hang out with. So if you're hanging out with people who are also aspirational, are also not jackasses, and are also intellectually curious, those traits will bring out the best in those same traits with you. And finding professional relationships that can become friendships, but even if they just remain professional acquaintances, but of folks of good mind and good character, in a way, that's like going to the gym of humanity. So it's not necessarily, it shouldn't even be primarily about do you wear a biz dev title, or about acquiring customers and clients. It's about going out there and figuring out kind of who are your people, who are the people that are going to challenge and inspire you, and who in return can you challenge and inspire to leave the campsite better.
So I love
business flows from that, which it should, all the better.
I love the term going to the gym of humanity, and yet when I think back, gosh, it's probably 20 years ago that you and I first met. When I look back to those days in Austin, sort of the boom, boom tech explosion of Austin from maybe 20-ish years ago, maybe more, one thing I remember was CEOs would happily hang out with lawyers and accountants and business development people, and venture capitalists were happy to meet with anybody. There was sort of this whole roundabout thing where people were cool about just getting to know who was there, as you call it, intellectually curious. I think nowadays it's a little bit harder. I think people have armor up now in a lot of communities, certainly more so in Austin than it used to be. So do you think it's harder to network now than it used to be?
I think it can be. There are definitely, Austin's a lot larger than it was back then. It can be more segregated into, here are the companies in gaming, here are the companies in hardware, here are the companies even in fintech or things like that. There are fewer things that pull us together. Back then we had ACG, we had the Austin Software Council before it was the Technology Council, and we had TechSchange and not much more. So there were a small number of watering holes.
Now, just for the record, I gotta brag on something. TechSchange is still around and is still active in our local community. I actually, the first meeting of the what would become the board, the first exploratory meeting, of TechXchange of about, I don't know, I think there were about 12 people, was actually held in my office when I worked at R.R. Donnelley. And we actually held the meeting to decide if we wanted to start TechXchange. And I was, I think, the third president of TechXchange. Mm-hmm. And so I'm always really proud to know, even though I'm not involved anymore, that it is still a thriving organization.
I would like to see it thriving again. It still exists. I think that it has never fully recovered from the shift of everything downtown. So when everything was near the, from the Arboretum down to, the arc of 360 down to the 360 meets Mopac on the south side, well, TechXchange was perfectly positioned at the Austin Country Club. That's no longer the tech industry. So I would say they're going through another rebirth. Certainly COVID hasn't helped them. But what you were part of founding there was for many years one of, and things like Brian Bonnell's Happy Hour. There still are some places where there is something of an open forum. But a lot of the other things have devolved into, kind of more walled gardens where there's someone sitting as the gatekeeper trying to extract some shekels of all the people who pass through the toll bridge, trying to shake them down for overpriced equity or overpriced real estate and some equity, which certainly doesn't build a culture of community in the tech industry here.
So let's keep talking about this whole idea of networking. So what advice do you have for other C-level executives, CEOs, CFOs, CTOs, et cetera? What advice do you have about why it's important to get involved in whatever community they live in or whatever vertical they're in, to be involved with 1, 2, or 3 organizations? What's the benefit of this?
I think you learn a lot. I think you make some professional friendships of people who fully understand what you're going through. So one of the problems with humans in general, but men specifically, is we tend to drown alone and we don't call out for help. Some of that is we can get depressed because we think our circumstances are uniquely unique and uniquely bad. And sadly, we're really not the snowflakes we want to be. We're not that special and we're not that unique. If we're having an issue, there are probably 50 people in the last 2 weeks somewhere who had that same issue, most of whom have navigated through it. So having a community of folks that understands our challenges, and people in other industries, sometimes it's not the same thing. People in a different role in the same company, sometimes it's not the same thing. You could have a spouse or a therapist who's definitely, desperately trying to understand what we're walking, but it can be really hard to explain that because it's a completely different journey than they've taken. So I think selfishly it's good from a community perspective. I think it's good from a learning perspective. And I think it opens people's eyes to new ways of doing things. Like, well, what technology are you using? Oh, what technology are you using? Oh, okay. And then for folks that might not want to stay at their job for the rest of their life, the network that is built up from that can be phenomenal. Like the community that SAP historically created and collaborated amongst CIOs and CTOs, I mean, they would help find you a job when you needed one. And in return, a lot of these people just put SAP in the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. You see the same thing with marketing technology. There was a woman in town who is no longer in town, but she went through like 5 or 6 director of marketing roles, usually about one a year. And every place she went, she left an Eloqua installation behind. And so, but part of that was she was incredibly well networked. And the guy who was the sales guy for Eloqua in town also was looking out for her interest. he was working very hard to get her a better offer every next year.
So I love comparing this concept of executives networking to this going to the gym of humanity. So what's your recommendation about sticking to kind of birds of the feather? Like, should CEOs only network with CEOs? Should VPs of marketing just hang with VPs of marketing? What's the benefit to cross-pollination?
I think there's a cross-pollination up and down within a function. There's also a cross-pollination with different roles. A lot of CMOs end up getting fired because they don't know how to speak CFO. A lot of CMOs get fired because they don't know how to speak VP of sales. So cross-functional stuff is useful. It's also useful periodically to go talk to some directors of marketing. You know, what's actually going on in the trenches, you know, and do those other people, do the other directors of marketing seem like they might be stronger than your directors of marketing? So I'm a fan of birds of a feather, but I'm also a fan of up and down the ladder and the things in the adjoining silos. So diversity is a good thing.
And you were talking about job search, you know, only 20% of 25% of strategic level positions are actually placed through search. Most jobs, whether it's entry level all the way through the top of the chain, most of them still come through your network and your connections. So, you know, it's the wider you can go in that gym of humanity, the stronger you're going to be when those opportunities come.
Right. I mean, there are a lot of CFOs that would prefer to not hire an executive search firm. And if they've already met and networked with a VP of sales,
although they're wrong, they should hire one, and they should hire They should hire Stanton Chase, but that's just because that's where I work.
Absolutely. But I mean, you know how to tell the extroverted CFO, right?
Yeah, he looks at your shoes when he talks.
He looks at exactly. Works so well with engineers and actuaries as well. There are multiple professions you can do that one on. But if folks feel like they already think they know who the right candidate is, I mean, at some level, some size of firms, people are going to naturally default to an executive search firm, and they want it to be thorough. But some other firms don't head to executive search until they've tried and face planted a few times on their own. And, you know, it's you actually want to be, as a C-level person, you'd ideally be networked both with a number of executive recruiters, but also just with a number of CFO folks. I remember a guy that I was trying to hire to be my COO and president a long time ago in a different apogee far, far away, the one that got up to about 100 folks. He had founded a local kind of mosh pit networking group for VPs of service in town. So there wasn't one. So he looked around and said, hey, it'd be nice to have a watering hole where we just talk shop. And he got about 30 of them together, and they some of it was virtual and some of it was actually doing stuff. He got at least 2 different jobs off of that thing for himself.
So shifting gears here really quick. You've worked with a lot of people. You've employed a lot of people over the years. Mm-hmm. You've seen a lot of people who have potential who end up stubbing their toe along the way. Why do you think some people who have great potential succeed and other people who also had great potential sort of fall off the cliff?
There are a long list of reasons. Some of them are personal. Some of them are does the rain fall on you or not? I mean, I've seen cases where somebody fell into Dell in the 90s and they fell out in the early 2000s as a VP of something or else, and great skills for that to happen. But thank goodness it wasn't Motorola that they fell into. So sometimes it's context because you don't control all your environment. Sometimes it's willingness to take risks, where opportunity meets preparedness. So are you prepared to take advantage of opportunities? Sometimes it's mate selection. Like how much value has been lost to the world by potential Elon Musks who ended up choosing a mate who was not entrepreneur friendly, or not in fact even just C-level friendly. Mm-hmm. So if someone is working, not just aspirational in terms of dreaming, but is working aggressively toward building their career, life is about time and trade-offs. And if they have a partner, have they chosen a partner who understands and empathizes and supports what they're doing? If not, they might not get there.
So, Bill, I got a couple more questions for you. But first, I have to thank the sponsor of this episode. So this episode, it's brought to you by Podfly Productions. Podfly takes the time and the headache out of creating your own podcast. They set you up with the right equipment, training, and guidance to ensure that you're going to sound amazing. Podfly does all the heavy lifting and that pesky technical work so that you can focus on creating great content, growing your audience, and interviewing really cool people who are making waves like Bill Leake. Hey, if you want to start a podcast, and I know that some of you do, jump over to podfly.net/coolthings and check out the offer that they have for the listeners of this show. So, Bill, I used to call the show Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do. What's the coolest thing you're doing in business right now?
Right now, I have 3 people writing some code for me, starting a new venture in, of all things, the events and conferences space. Because, silly me, I'm guessing that a lot of people are not writing new code right now in the events and conferences space.
A lot of people aren't doing anything right now in the events and conferencing space.
So the thought here is really quite simple. When you look at things like Indeed, it's a wonderful search engine for jobs. There's really not a great way to figure out if I've got budget to go to 2 fintech shows or 2 usability shows. Well, what are the 400 in North America? What are the 5 that have Tom Singer as their conference catalyst?
Those would be the best ones.
Those are absolutely. But there's not an easy conference discovery tool that has any quality in it that it makes it easy to compare conferences by sector, by cost, by attendees, all the other kinds of things. It really lends itself well to a mostly structured and partially unstructured database. So Google's not the best place to do that. And none of the conference organizers, well, for the most part, they're exceptions, but you've seen a few conference websites in your day. Most of them are not going to be winning any awards for how wonderful the websites are and how wonderful the website experience is. And so if I'm trying to exhibit at a conference, how do I figure out what does a booth cost? What does this cost? And so the process for all the event planners and event managers and attendees and even speakers out there of saying, these are all the conferences I might be interested in a sector. I'd like you to just automatically email me when they're, a month before the call for speakers is due.
Interesting.
So I'm putting together a code base that my goal is for it to be a conference discovery tool that adds value to attendees, to exhibitors, to speakers, to the event organizers, and allows things that event organizers might not like ratings and reviews. Is this show better than this show? Does this show have senior people talking, or is it more of an elementary level of knowledge? How's the darn coffee? Is the food any good? Is it in a sketchy neighborhood? Is it too far away from the central city? There's a lot of stuff that conference insiders could and would share with the appropriate conference community. And that data right now is not being elicited.
Interesting. Well, I look forward to seeing that when it comes to fruition. So, Bill, when you look out into the world of business leaders, who do you admire? Who do you think makes waves?
Well, I will say that making waves is not necessarily the thing that is to be most admired, or making real waves of substance are probably what's to be admired. So the people who are building real things. Because I do see a lot of people who can be show ponies and kind of doing a look at me, and they're sort of making personal branding waves. But then you kind of look back at the 4 or 5 campsites that they visited and said, well, it doesn't look like they left them better. So, I mean, clearly some of the obvious ones. I mean, Steve Jobs left waves. Elon Musk is doing that now. We've got a number of folks in Austin who've done that several times, and I think have left positive contributions behind them. Bill Bach did that for many years. Mark McLean is still doing that at SailPoint locally. Joel Trammell did that with several things. He still does a give back with his involvement with the Austin Technology Council and other things, and kind of his projects at Texas CEO Magazine and Chorus. Neither of those is I hope I'm wrong, but I don't get the sense that either of those is going to 3x his personal balance sheet at this point. They feel like labors of love and labors of hopefully not losing money, but giving back to the community, where he'd make a lot more money simply just going and being a mercenary CEO for hire now based on his track record. And yet he's endeavoring to do things that systematize his lessons learned and share them back with other folks.
Awesome. So, Bill, if people want to know more about you, they want to find out about Apogee Results, how do they find you?
Well, I could give them your cell phone number.
Don't call me.
Oh, no. Well, you can vet them for me. I trust your curation. They can visit my website, Apogee, APOGEE, results.com. They can email me, Leake, Leake, at apogeeresults.com. They can come by our office, although nobody seems to be there anymore. So that's kind of odd.
Someday people will be back in the office.
I think so. I think humans can't be all virtual.
Nope, I agree. And in fact,
although they do spend a lot of time in video games, so they can be the younger generation can be distressingly virtual.
Well, it is fascinating to me. There's a lot of predictions about the meetings industry, and a lot of people think, oh, it's going to go away. Everything's going virtual. The people I talk to, most people have Zoom fatigue, and they just want so badly to get back to a live event and hug their friends again. So I think once we get on the other side of this, those live gatherings are going to return in with a gusto.
Yes, lunch is not the same over Zoom.
No. It's in fact, I'm going to a black tie gala over Zoom in April, and it's like, God, really, like I don't even know if I'm going to wear pants.
I was going to ask, you're just going to do the top half, or or the full Monty?
It's quite possible I may not wear pants. I probably would wear boxers, but
okay.
I don't know. I mean, I putting a tux on to sit in my office, with my ring light on in front of me just doesn't really excite me the way it would to be able to go to the cocktail party with these people at the industry event. So,
right. Which is where we first met at Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year Awards.
It was Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year Awards, probably easily 22 years ago or something like that.
I think it was probably 99 or 2000, and it was a black tie gala, and we had a blast.
And we're still friends to this day. So networking matters, because sometimes you meet really cool people like Bill Leake. So Bill, again, thanks for jumping on here on Making Waves at Sea Level. And thank you to everybody who tuned in. I say it every show. If it wasn't for the audience, why would I do this? There'd be no podcast. It's all about you guys. So thank you for those of you who actually participate in the community. There is a Facebook page. You can find us on all the social medias. It's at Cool Podcast on Twitter. And then also you can find me at Tom Singer everywhere. We're going to be back in a couple of days with an interview with somebody just as cool as Bill Leake. I know you're thinking, Tom, how will you ever find anybody so cool? But we do it every single time. But in the meantime, go out there, make sure that your career ladder is against the right wall, because there's nothing worse than climbing to the top and realizing I did this in the wrong place. I know, because I did that for a long time. Go out there and have some fun. Try some new things. And while you're at it, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the Making Waves at Sea Level podcast. Without your listening to these in-depth conversations, there would be no show. Connect with Tom at tomsinger.com and follow him on Twitter and Instagram at tomsinger.